I'm calling in from Vienna, Austria, where it's late evening now. But I am so excited about today's conversation. I want to welcome you all to today's discussion on the critical topic of childhood nutrition, where we'll explore the foundations of healthy eating and how to drive early consumer demand for nutritious foods. The fact that 12 million children in the United States experience food insecurity, and even more, an alarming 14.7 million American children suffer from obesity today. This is a distressing reality. And access to nutritious meals at schools must play a crucial role in ensuring that all children receive the essential diverse diets required to support their proper physical and cognitive development. School nutrition programs are not just about providing meals. They're an investment. They're an investment in health, education, and the future potential of our nation's youth. In our discussion today, we'll delve into the multifaceted challenges children face in accessing and consuming nutritious foods, and how we as a society could overcome through the challenges through innovative solutions. We'll explore the critical role of education and awareness campaigns in empowering children and their families with the information and tools they need to make wholesome food choices, even outside the schoolhouse. I would argue, especially outside the schoolhouse. Our conversation will also scrutinize key federal and state policies, evaluating their impact on nutrition outcomes for children, and identifying areas where policy changes could potentially lead to meaningful improvements. We'll examine how early exposure to diverse and nutritious foods can shape children's lifelong eating habits, emphasizing the importance of fostering a positive food environment at an early age. Throughout this dialogue, we'll seek out to not only identify challenges, but also celebrate successes with some of that are led by some of our panelists here today. So those successes and initiatives that have demonstrated tangible improvements in childhood nutrition. So let's get right to it. I am joined by an amazing panel today. Sally Sampson, Mara Fleischman, Diana Winters, and Sophie Egan bring a wealth of experience and expertise to shed light on the importance of nourishing our children's bodies and their minds. Sally Sampson is the founder and president of Chop Chop Family, and she'll discuss the crucial role of family cooking and how cooking can inspire kids to eat real food. Mara Fleischman is the Chief Executive Officer of the Chef Ann Foundation, and she'll help us deconstruct the complex policy and macro issues that help us and also help us construct and discuss the solutions to improve childhood nutrition. Diana Winters is also with us today, and she's the Director of Health, Law and Policy Program and the Deputy Director at the Resnick Center for Food Policy at UCLA School of Law, and she'll provide a legal perspective on the policies needed to support improved nutrition outcomes for children. Sophie Egan is the Director of the Stanford Institute and Sustainable Foods at Stanford Dining Room, Hospitalities and Auxiliaries, SDHA. Love a good acronym. Sophie will share her insights into driving consumer demand early for nutritious foods and sustainable systems. Today's conversation is not just about theory, but also about practical solutions. Our panelists have each been actively involved in driving the change in their respective fields and their businesses, and their experience will help guide our discussion. Our goal today is to not only raise awareness, but also inspire action out there. Let's explore how we can collectively work towards a future where every child has access to nutritious foods and the knowledge to make healthy choices. Sally, I'm not sure if you're back with us. Are you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All righty. I'm
Amazing.
so thrilled. I am so thrilled. So let's just jump right into it with you, Sally.
Okay.
Your work at Chop Chop Family, your publications, your writings have been amazing and have brought so many children into the kitchen. How do you see the role of the child in driving healthier behavior change for the whole family?
First, let me just say how thrilled I am to be here and to be included with this amazing panel. So how do I see the role? I think the kid is everything, honestly. You hear so many stories, with we publish a magazine, it's for children, but obviously you need the parent to be engaged. And people often ask us, who's driving the change? And it's really the children. It's the children who are saying, hey, here's a recipe for roasted carrots. Can we roast carrots? Hey, here's this. I tasted this. Can we do this? I think that if you want to really make an impact on the kids, what kids are eating, it really has to start with them rather than an adult saying, here's what you should do. And I think you just have to engage the child.
So let me come over to you, Mara, because you're at the Chef Ann Foundation, and millions of children face long-term nutritional issues such as obesity. We heard the numbers at the top of this, and you just heard Sally talk about how it's led by the child. But I would ask, if it's led by the child, how can school nutrition play a role in addressing these health issues and challenges and promoting a better health future for children and providing children with more information? What are you seeing out there that's working?
Thanks so much. And thanks for having me and shedding light on this really important topic and pulling together such a powerhouse group of women. Nutrition related disease is king right now, and it is we are seeing it everywhere. And more so than that, the connection to the amount of ultra processed foods that kids are eating is truly outstanding. Unfortunately, a lot of our school food programs have come to rely on ultra processed food, just as families have come to rely on ultra processed food. And there is more and more research coming about that is correlating consumption of ultra processed food to nutrition related disease. So I think what our schools can do is they can treat food like the valued topic it should be in schools. These kids are going to be eating 3 meals a day for the rest of their lives. In some cases, they might not use algebra for the rest of their lives, but they are going to be eating 3 meals a day for the rest of their lives. So I think it's on us to make sure they have that springboard that's going to help them thrive and meet their true potential. So, what I say is that we have to reduce this ultra processed food. We have to get back to serving them fresh food, whole ingredient based, recipe based production food, so that their palates can get used to that type of food again, so that we're providing them that springboard for their nutritional habits for life. People say to me, well, they're not going to pick it. They want something else. And that's true. But if you give a child the choice between a Dorito and a piece of broccoli, they're going to pick the Dorito. And I think
Not always.
not always, not always. That's our hope. But a lot of times they are. And, that food is, is our deed to be addictive. And so it's our responsibility, I think, as educators, as parents, as community leaders, to give them better nutrition to live their healthiest lives.
So, and Sally, thanks for jumping in there. Let me just tell you, I'd love if one of the panelists says something and you want to come in, just signal me, and we want this to be a conversation. We have some of the best minds and talent working on this issue today. Let's make sure that our audience hears what's on your mind, even if the question wasn't directed at you. And so let me come right now over to you, Diana, because we talk about this needs to lead with the child. If we talk about what's being served in schools and that impact that has on child nutrition and diet-related diseases, including obesity, what role does the policy and other legal considerations play in shaping this current state of our school nutrition programs?
Thank you. And I'll also say thank you for having me here. This is to talk about this incredibly important issue. You can't think about school nutrition without thinking about legal and policy forces. It's interesting because both what Mara and Sally were talking about seems like, okay, if we have a solution to this problem, let's implement it. But it's a really layered and knotty problem, actually, because of the legal and policy considerations with school nutrition. And so school lunch and breakfast are collaborations between the federal and the state governments. To the school lunch, the provision of school lunch at schools was developed at the turn of the 20th century by progressives, and the National School Lunch Program was implemented in 1946 as part of a program to increase the defensive capacity of the United States, to build up our children so they were strong. But it also became a vehicle for distributing surplus goods helping our agricultural industry redistribute what they had as surplus. For example, extra dairy, great, send it to the schools to incorporate into their school lunches. The federal government role increased from the 1950s through the 1970s, and it has continued to increase today. We can't talk about changing school lunch without considering policy and law from a micro level, from procurement and administration and infrastructure in the schools, to a macro level, like controversies over the nutrition that we should be providing our children, and the politicization of this nutrition, which we've all seen in the last decade or so.
Sophie, that was really understanding that macro level impact of federal law and as well as state law and on the what's served in our schools is really critical to developing the solutions for providing better school lunches. And I know you are working at Stanford, and your program serves college students, but while your program has been primarily in the context of higher education, how do you see the lessons from institutions like universities being translated to elementary, middle, and high schools in terms of advancing nutrition innovation to overcome some of the issues that were identified by Mara?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I'll just echo Diana, Mara, and Sally and say that it's a huge honor and privilege to be part of this absolutely incredible lineup of female leaders. And thank you, Ertharin, for your leadership. I love this question because we really think about it in two directions. We think about the students that maybe some of them were lucky enough to have gone to a school lunch program that was, touched by Mara's or Sally's programs, or maybe they had this exposure in K-12, but maybe they didn't. And we have this really incredible period of identity formation during one's college years, shaping not only the palate formation that's so critical in young years, but also shaping one's food identity. What are the values that they want reflected in the foods they choose? What are the things that they want their food choices to reflect in themselves and the things they care about? And then we also really take very seriously at Stanford, it's not just the 25,000 meals we're serving every day, but the 450 million meals that those students will consume in their collective lifetimes, and the millions of meals beyond those that they'll influence in their own children's lives in the future. Maybe they'll start companies, maybe they'll become leaders and influence food programs and beyond. So in our environment, one of the things that's really, really kind of unique to Stanford and why the Stanford Food Institute exists is we use campus dining halls as living laboratories for behavior change. And we've partnered with a global network of colleges and universities that I co-direct, the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, to see what works for shifting to healthier and more sustainable and absolutely delicious food choices. And we share those learnings open source, not just for campus dining, but it's very much intentionally for K-12, for really anyone serving large numbers of meals and large numbers of diners. And it's within that living lab concept that we've seen a couple key things emerge. One, leading with flavor. It is very much to what Mara was saying as well. If the food doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter how healthy or sustainable, in our case, it is. Maybe someone will try it, but they won't try it again. And they probably won't eat it. So we look at both selection and consumption, and that's hugely applicable in K-12 as well, where we want to be avoiding waste in schools. We want to be using those dollars to the best possible outcome, right, of actually nourishing bodies. And so it's really powerful to look at what actually moves the needle and leading with flavor, both the food itself and how we describe food. One of the accomplishments we're most proud of at Stanford and in the collaborative is something called the Edgy Veggies Toolkit, which found that very small changes, right? Using edgy, taste-focused labels on vegetable-based dishes increased selection by 29% and consumption by 39%. And all we did was change the words on the description. And it's giving that same, the Dorito treatment, so to speak, right? The playbook of the less healthy foods, applying that to the healthier foods and really increasing the expectation that these foods can be decadent, indulgent, full of herbs, spices, ingredients, and really fantastic culinary techniques that make kids not only excited to try it, but again, to eat it again. So that paired with the actual culinary excellence and training and sourcing is a really powerful combination, as is food choice architecture and shaping environments, which happy to talk more about that, but huge applications of the work we've done and is occurring around campus dining nationwide for school food and how food is presented, placement, portion size, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Leading with flavor. That's true at every stage of your life.
Exactly.
You're talking
right. Who doesn't want flavorful food, right? Whatever age you are.
Yeah. And I'm going to come back over you, Sally, because you reacted quite quickly to the decision tree of the child between the Doritos and the veggies and saying not always. And so if it's not always, in what ways can schools engage students in the process of designing and choosing nutritious meals that resonate with their preferences as well as their culture? And I think things like the edgy veggies may be leaning into the area, the type of work that you probably suggest.
I love that. I am calling Sophie as soon as we get off this. But I think that a lot of what we've done with schools is they do, like, let's say we focus in each issue on a particular ingredient. And I think this last one was tomatoes. So we might have in the lunchroom, so like we don't really work in the lunchroom. We're really, the teachers use chop and send it home. But in the lunchroom, they might say, cut up 4 different kinds of tomatoes. And maybe have the kids try one with salt on it, try one with vinaigrette on it. So if you think about, if any of you have little kids, if you say to the child, do you want to wear your blue pants today or your green skirt? You're just giving them 2 choices that you want them to make. You don't say, what do you want to wear? So what we find with kids is that if you say, do you want the broccoli with salt or do you want to put hummus on it? Because they have a choice. and they're part of it, they choose. And we see it work over and over and over. And in fact, we used to work with Stephen, who used to be at Chef Ann Foundation. He was in Watertown and he did that routinely. And the kids would come back and ask, can we have that broccoli again? Can we have that cauliflower again? And I think it's really giving the kids options. And, you know, something that we talk a lot about is if you think about a child has an art class and they do their drawing and they bring it home and the parent puts it on the refrigerator. It's this thing also of kids making something, being able to take some home and feeling proud of it and sharing it. So I think that's how you can make an impact on the Dorito versus broccoli.
So thanks so much for that, Sally. And Mara, I'm coming back over to you now, because when we talk about making the choices and giving kids the access to more affordable, nutritious food through school meals, you're doing it already. And I'd love for you to provide some insights into how the Chef Ann Foundation has reached thousands, and some would even suggest millions of children. What strategies have been instrumental for you in achieving the widespread impact that I've read about with your organization? What are you doing right?
Well, I think it's what our food service director is doing right in our country, in different K-12 school food programs, and that's, you know, those are the people we're trying to support. But I would say there's a few things. One of the biggest and kind of easiest gateway things to do in your school food program is putting in a salad bar, and I think our partners on our Salad Bars to Schools program are on this call from Whole Kids Foundation. That's one of our longest running programs. We have been working with Whole Kids Foundation for over a decade to help put salad bars into school food programs. And the beauty of that is that you have a whole bar with fresh food, right? And you're offering kids choice. So to Sally's point, you know, when you offer kids choice, one, they feel empowered to choose what they like. I will say my son, he's 12. He gets an option of salad bar every day. He only likes cauliflower and carrots with ranch dressing. That's the only thing he likes. So that's what he puts on his plate. And if the district was serving another vegetable or a pre-packed salad, you know, he would have to take that whole thing and he wouldn't eat the majority of it. So I think that's really important. Also, salad bars help school food programs kind of go off into the freshly prepared meals initiative, because in order to have that, you have to order fresh food, you have to store fresh food, you have to prep fresh food, and you have to get kids used to eating fresh food. And I think that leads back to the broccoli and Dorito comment, which is, you know, what we see a lot is that sometimes districts kind of dip their toe into fresh food. And so what they're serving a fresh, you know, teriyaki chicken bowl with broccoli next to a processed, pizza or something coming out of a box. And sometimes that's when the choice is there. We really try and get districts to serve all fresh food, all fresh choices. And because what we'll hear sometimes from schools is, well, the kids prefer this one, so I'm not going to take it off the menu. The kids prefer the processed pizza, so I'm not going to take it off the menu. And that's back to that comment. So what we do in general is we help districts move from processed heat and serve to cook from scratch. We help them look at food, finance, facilities, human resources, and marketing to create a self-operated cook from scratch program. Self-operated just means that they're operating it themselves. They're not hiring a food service management company to do so. And with the limited funds that districts have to support a lunch program, which is currently about $4.30 for a reimbursable meal, it's really hard to add kind of extra margin in there for a for-profit company to run something. So that's what we do, and that's what we're finding success. But the great news, I would say, is that we have more districts waiting for our grants than ever before. So there is this like tipping point where school districts are wanting to create and serve fresh food. They're coming out of the COVID, out of, they still have issues with labor. We still have supply chain issues, but they're really motivated to do this work.
So you've described a fresh food program, and that is the goal. Some would argue that we should provide a diverse diet that gives children more choice, including fresh foods, particularly in school districts that have challenges with budgets and costs, and they're trying to balance what children will eat versus what they can afford. But let's go over to Diana, because I'd love to hear from a policy perspective, what's just been described. What are the key challenges in ensuring that school nutrition, fresh food programs, cook from scratch programs, that they can effectively contribute to positive child development? Do we have the support from policymakers to support the budgets that are necessary to deliver these programs? And if not, why not?
It's tough. The first thing that comes to mind is infrastructure. And Mara talked a little bit about that. And I would probably like to give it back to Mara to talk more about infrastructure. And certain jurisdictions, school lunch in the K-12 context is a collaboration between the federal and state governments and federal and state funding. And we've seen certain jurisdictions start to understand the importance of fresh food and the infrastructure that's needed, and to move towards providing these sort of funds. And then other jurisdictions either don't care, don't want it, or don't have the money. And there's also a huge challenge in terms of implementing this kind of infrastructure to provide the fresh foods, I think, in larger school districts. Like I'm thinking of LAUSD, and I'm thinking of the Los Angeles Unified School District, where my kids are right now, and thinking about my son just started high school at a big LAUSD high school, and right now they're doing some renovation and they don't even have a cafeteria. And salad bar would be fantastic, and I don't know how it will work logistically. But with the help of organizations like Chef Ann or like Chop Chop, I think they could possibly do it. So I'm thinking about infrastructure, and then there's also conflicting federal and financial considerations, like the need to use the surplus goods. For example, I'm thinking specifically of dairy, and that we've had the dairy industry at times work to make sure that dairy is incorporated into school lunches, even to a point which may not be seen as healthy for the children. And then there's also the need to maintain certain governmental contracts. And there's also the need to reduce food waste, which, whether it's actual food waste or perceived food waste, one kid throwing away an apple that ends up on TikTok can be blown up out of proportion. So I think there are a lot of challenges, but also opportunities.
Can I jump in?
I was about to say, Mara, go.
I just because it is such a perception, an incorrect perception, in our country, that that communities that are more affluent have an easier time operating a fresh food program. I just want to make sure that we all are in the same understanding here. So the federal government operates the National School Lunch Program, okay? The reimbursement rate is the same for kids who are on both the free and reduced lunch program or kids who pay across every state, with the exception of Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, I believe, who get some added reimbursement dollars because of their location. So, it's approximately $4.30 for a free lunch that you get reimbursed for. You get that reimbursement whether you're in Wyoming, Colorado, New York, anywhere. And frankly, it is sometimes harder for districts that are in more affluent areas to pull off a fresh food program because they have fewer kids on the free and reduced lunch program, which means they have fewer kids that are kind of automatically participating in the school food program. So they have to make sure they can get the paid kids to participate to increase the volume to actually operate a program. I just want to make sure we all understood that as we say it. And when, Diana's correct that it is a state and federal program in some places. So states like California, Massachusetts, Colorado, who have passed healthy school meals for all, what they do is they make up for what where the federal government leaves off. So if the federal government only pays this much for a free lunch, this much for a reduced lunch, this much for a paid lunch, the state then pays the rest to make sure all kids get free lunch.
Okay, so you're myth busting for us, and so that's always a good thing. But I think that if we had someone here from the LA public schools or the Chicago public schools, they would argue with you that their school districts in Wilmette, Illinois, or Winnetka, where you have supplemental support from parent organizations, from from their local organizations to support healthier school meals versus what they are providing to their large school districts that without the infrastructure support as well from their states, that they can't support the type of fresh meal program that you've just described. That's a conversation for another day, and it means we may all need to come back again. But these are the kinds of issues that we need to debate, that we need to understand more about where are the dollars and how can we better use those dollars. And so I'd like to come back to you, if I may, Sophie, because as you look ahead, what are some of the key areas of focus and opportunities for institutions in further advancing nutrition innovation and some of the programs that have been described by Mara that you have seen that can make a difference?
Yeah, so and some of these definitely have applications in K-12 and in school food, and some of them are really for kind of the food service industry as a whole. So one of the things we're really excited about at the Stanford Food Institute is equitable supply chains. We have a program to support procurement from Black farmers who have faced systemic racism at every point of gaining access to wholesale markets, and have been really reduced to numbers that are almost complete disappearance in this country. And it's an area that maybe seems like, how does that relate to school nutrition? But it's all in the vein of procurement and of offering not only nutritious, delicious, hopefully also sustainable foods, but culturally relevant foods. And we're really excited about two toolkits that we've developed with a community partner called Farms to Grow, based in Oakland, through an Office of Community Engagement grant from Stanford. And I share this example, it's just one. The toolkits are open source. They're for really a network of networks, K-12, healthcare food service operators, corporate food service operators, Good Food Purchasing Program, and others who oversee a variety of institutional food service programs, to just really embrace the power of institutions as change agents. And we take that responsibility very seriously at Stanford, and we're part of an initiative called the Equity Forward Anchor Network. And it's, again, just kind of something that's on the horizon. I think there's going to be increased recognition of the potential allyships and collective action, collective impact that can occur in a region to reduce racial wealth gaps, increase increase access for everyone to, the good food for all, by really bringing together a variety of institution types in a given area. And that's an example with the counties that we're partnering with, Santa Clara County and San Jose County and surrounding Stanford area. But that's an example where those two things kind of go together, and we're really keeping an eye on that. The other one I'll share is, a lot of the work that we do is really at the intersection of human and environmental health. We very much focus on nutrition and mental health and all of the benefits to the individual eater. But again, we take very seriously our supply chains and the footprint that we have. There's an increased demand being placed, and rightfully so, on universities to really chart a path forward for addressing what's called Scope 3 emissions. And this basically reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There's Scopes 1 and 2. Those are hard and important, but they're a teeny tiny fraction compared to Scope 3. That's all purchased goods and services. And one of the easiest ways to really think about that as an institution, as an entire enterprise, is about the foods that are purchased. So we're really leading a lot of that climate action planning from a food systems lens on campus, and then sharing openly with others, because again, it's complicated, but also showing the co-benefits. Here's how you can shift, say, your total protein portfolio towards lower emissions, lower environmental footprint foods as a total pie chart. But guess what? At the same time, increased diet quality and nutrient density of total foods, total dishes that are served. If you're increasing whole grains, if you're replacing less sustainable proteins, a lot of times it's also improving the health profile of those proteins served, legumes, nuts, and so forth. So that intersection is a key part that we're looking at that has huge applications in definitely in school food, and really looking for the co-benefits, the win-wins. And lastly, I'll just say, as we do that, the power of partnership and collaboration cannot be overstated, because, as has been described here, pick your problem, right? There is no shortage of challenges within food systems, within feeding school children, within feeding really anyone at scale. But it's through this more, I think, dialogue sharing of what is working, what's moving the needle that can be replicated or scaled. So it's things like our university research collaborative, the Equity Forward Anchor Network I mentioned. We're also part of Drawdown Labs. Whatever makes sense in a given area, it's just don't go it alone is my biggest point. And so I'm increasingly seeing this, and it's great to see this question in the chat too. I'm seeing it in grant applications. I'm seeing it in a lot of programs. Like, partnership is not optional, in my opinion. And we really believe in the power of partnership, and again, get really excited about collective action to solve a lot of these most pressing challenges, but also opportunities that are really at that intersection of nutrition and sustainability.
So let's bring in our audience and first of all, you've given us some great tools Sophie, that the audience is asking for links to those tools. So if our team can help you get those, push the links out so that you can make them available to our audience, that'd be terrific. But let's start with the first question from Peter Contardo, who asks, can you share examples of the specific types of public-private partnerships needed for successful implementation of community-centered school nutrition initiatives? Any of you who want to answer that question? Any examples of public-private partnerships that are working?
I'm not sure this is completely answering the question, because we're sort of in the process, but we're working with New York City public schools to get Chop Chop into all the elementary school classrooms. And some of the money is coming from the school or of the mayor's office, actually. And then we're also looking at companies to sponsor those copies in addition. New York City has a lot of kids, and so it's obviously a very big project. And I think that there are a lot of public organizations and private organizations who have similar goals, and they're able to work together to benefit the audience that they seek to benefit.
So those public-private partnerships are important, but Carla asked a question about working with nonprofits.
We're nonprofit.
And local governments. Do you see any difference in what nonprofits can provide? And Mara, as a leader of a foundation, how do you see the role of nonprofits and foundations in working with local school districts in the resolution of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, this is a passion point for me, is like the puzzle of the, how is the community going to come together to solve these bigger issues? And I think probably one of the most successful examples I can put my finger on happens to be in California. So California was the first state to pass healthy school meals for all. When states pass healthy school meals for all, they are seeing an increase in daily participation amongst the kids, because we were missing a whole group of kids and families that needed access to free meals that didn't have it. So what happened was last year when they passed it, the participation went up, and we're still in a labor crisis. And so we have underemployment rates in our school food programs. So it's kind of like this perfect storm. So we created this partnership coalition called Healthy School Food Pathways, which was a partnership between California government, Department of Education, Department of Ag, California community colleges, and the districts and Department of Labor, to create an apprenticeship program to recruit people into school food, to train them how to operate a freshly prepared meal program, and to build capacity for the school districts. And then the districts themselves are increasing their scratch cooking so they can be host sites and train these apprentices. And so together, I think we're trying to look at like the future workforce and building that future workforce in California that can have impact both on, the nutrition of kids, agricultural impact, because you're buying more fresh food. So that's why the Department of Ag is excited. And the community colleges now have this other culinary pathway that they originally didn't kind of look at.
So when we talk about nonprofits and local governments, we have one of our attendees who asked, how can the private sector play a role in solving the need for the new facilities that you've just described, expanding the programs? What role should the private sector play in the change that we've been discussing for our school meals programs? Anyone?
Well, I can just quickly say that, one of the big issues is that districts do need facilities to cook from scratch, right? And building central kitchens is really expensive. So for instance, the Oakland central kitchen costs almost $80 million in California. Sacramento cost almost 55. Here, Boulder County was about 18 million. Something that I've been talking to different private sector folks about is, what's the ability for them to build central kitchens and have districts rent back from them, instead of having to pass these massive bonds in the district for them to build these central kitchens. So that's just one example.
That's a great example, though. Are there other examples? Because what you'll hear from private sector is, where's the commercial return opportunity? If it's not corporate social responsibility. So we want the corporate social responsibility money, we want their philanthropic money, but the question becomes, how do we build the case for supporting the return on investment that private sector will say is required for them to invest in supporting the infrastructure development for these schools?
So I'm happy to jump in just to share sort of more conceptually. I think it's a great question, and it's hard to pinpoint specific companies that have really good case studies yet. Hopefully we'll have more of them. But what gives me hope, honestly, is the emergence of the idea of the true cost of food or true value of food, because it is trying to make that case exactly as you're saying. So Rockefeller Foundation, for example, has been the first to really quantify the true cost of, the current food system in terms of healthcare costs, environmental externalities. And I think it's when you're equipped with numbers like those. I haven't looked at this report since it first came out, so I don't have them off the top of my head, but I can find the link and I'll put it in the chat. But those are the kind of numbers that you can go to, I think, some of these companies and say, hey, in terms of your insurance cost or in terms of your whatever, showing the downstream effects that maybe aren't as apparent in the equation of where's my ROI for buying, a combi oven or whatever it is. Instead of it's really saying, what is the cost of not nourishing and in supporting a generation, the generation that's going to come affect my bottom line in the ways that are absolutely optimal, as well as the kind of broader environmental impacts that do have an impact on their supply chain, or they have an impact on their ability to access goods and ingredients and so forth. And I'm hopeful that those kinds of reframings can just change the way that calculation and that accounting is even discussed in private sector.
And can I just point out, I think you're absolutely right, Sophie, and the connections between the calculations of the true cost for food and good food purchasing. The good food, you mentioned before, the good food purchasing program, which helps institutions across the country meet certain metrics in terms of purchasing, and that can have a huge effect. And incorporating this true cost, I think, is really, really important, and they're doing that.
So I would ask, we've talked about nonprofits, we've talked about private sector, public-private partnerships. We know school meals were started by the federal government as a response to the physical condition of our youth as we entered World War II. And the need for increased access to nutritious foods by young people. The question is, without a war, can we, and Diana, I'll start with you, can we develop policies at the federal level that would support universal school meals programs? Or is that a pipe dream? Or we need another COVID epidemic? What types of action could we as a community of interest drive at the federal level that would inure to the development of the policies that would support a national universal school meals program?
Again, I will probably turn it over to Mara, who and we were right before the webinar started. We were chatting very briefly about some grants that USDA is distributing right now for small and rural communities and school districts that the Chef Foundation is helping to distribute to support this. I think, without a war like we do have, we're constantly in a low level of needing to keep readiness. And I'll also point out that you said without, do we need another COVID epidemic? I know we don't, obviously, but I think rates of obesity actually went up during the COVID epidemic, even though we saw school districts step in incredibly forcefully to try to make sure that the students and families that were no longer attending school were fed. I think we perhaps increased our reliance on ultra-processed foods. But it's a hard project, but maybe turning to Mara and talking about these specific grants is one way we can see that the federal government is actually supporting our school nutrition.
Mara, those lights shining on you.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to answer another question that the pre-K school meals are covered in the CACFP meals. So we are providing funding for pre-K meals through the USDA. I'm not part of that we, but the USDA is that we. So yes, I think we are seeing we're I feel like in a really beautiful moment right now, and it's about time. COVID shined a light on the fact that school meals are essential, not a nice to have. And then we kind of got into this administration. We have Secretary Vilsack, who heads up the USDA right now. And he has, a whole nother, term under his belt under the Obama administration in this role. And I think he's really he's pushing the envelope right now. And he is working with his team to create funding for these private public partnerships that we talked about. And that's another grant that's going to come out that we're working with the USDA on, that will come out in the next couple of weeks, I think, from the Chef Ann Foundation. And then also over nearly 300 districts got from anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000, small rural districts, to help increase their school meal program. So I think there's a lot going on with the USDA. I think they're doing a lot, and they are open to so much. How can they change the commodity food program? We just did a series of listening sessions with a group called Scratchworks, where the USDA listened to school food operators. What do they need from the commodity food program to serve more fresh food? I think the issue is around the fact that we all know that meals should be free for all kids everywhere. And, just like math books are and bus rides are and everything else. And right now that subject is not getting any traction in the federal government because of the partisan issues going on, but it is getting traction in the states. So where the feds are leaving off, the states are picking up, and we now have 8 states that have passed healthy school meals for all. And I think it's moving fast.
So I see a lot of nodding of heads when you say states are picking up. What's anybody else seeing out there that's happening in the states that we should talk about here? Sophie, you were nodding. Go ahead.
No, it's just, I think there's I guess I'm nodding because I think of it as levers in food systems, right? And it's much like why we see the value of institutions. It's who's more nimble, who is able to move sort of quicker and maybe be more early adopters. And it's part of actually what Mara was saying about self-operated districts. It's a big reason. We're a self-operated food service program, and we can do a lot. We can test things. We can, it's more just to say the pace of change. Who's going to be really accelerating the pace of change? And I was nodding because I do think states, certainly, we're based in California, and many people have said, as goes California, so goes the nation. I'm not here to say that's the case or not, but it's the conversations that we're able to have, the things we're able to be involved in that I mentioned. A lot of that is because of you could say sort of the enabling environment, the enabling policy environment that, Diana and Mara are probably really helping to create in that area, softening the ground, so to speak. California is a state that, when I talk about, in our world, we have one plate, one planet sustainable food program. We're talking about climate smart dining. That's not, seen as kind of nanny state. That's seen as an inevitability. Absolutely. There's, at the state level, the Office of Farm to Fork, there's policies about climate friendly menuing and sourcing in school food, right? So yes, absolutely, we better be talking about that in a private institution serving college students. So I think it's really thinking about how these different layers and spheres affect different leaders who are these gatekeepers and decision makers, and kind of where their sense of the wins and again the kind of pace of change and who's going to be at the forefront and who's going to be a little bit of a later adopter.
So we have 4 minutes left. I want each of you, this is our lightning round, to tell our audience what they can do to help affect the change for better school nutrition programs. Let's start with you, Sally.
I think to just educate kids and on what nutrition is, what good food is, what food is. If you show a kid a cantaloupe, a lot of them don't know what it is. So I think it's really taking the steps and really talking about what Sophie was talking about, which this is delicious and juicy and all that, and making it super seductive. And I think that will make all the difference. And of course, getting them to cook.
Getting kids to cook and building better awareness in consumers, starting with our children as consumers.
Right.
Mara, over to you.
I think the first and most important thing you can do is try and get healthy school meals for all passed in your state. And if you want to know where your state is in that, you should go to frac.org. They have a healthy school meals page that shows where every state is in that legislative process. So that would be the first thing I'd say.
Great advice. Getting involved with your states and making sure that you have the information that can help drive change at home. Diana, over to you.
I think we should all make sure that food systems and child nutrition are central to the issues that our policymakers think about and aren't tangential, that we make sure as we hold our policymakers accountable and think about electing the next rounds, that we think about the critical nature of food systems and child nutrition to so many of the huge and pressing problems of today.
That's
Right,
great.
sounds like
Sophie, you get the last word.
Oh man, no pressure. No, I'll really build on Diana's comment to say I really think it's about elevating the role, the importance of food at every level of life and thriving. The continuity, as we've described, from preschool, from the childhood, all the way, and really thinking of this as a life course question, to me is really a missed opportunity because of whether it's how much time is given to kids to eat their lunch and school food, or other ways that sort of societally the value of food and the importance of food as as medicine, as prevention, as joy, bonding, cultural identity, cultural relevance, all of these things. It touches everything, as Diana was saying. But I really also think that the more that it's elevated in its importance, the more, as you were describing, some of the investment will come, some of the funds will come. So it's that true cost piece that comes with elevating it in the dialogue. And what you can do is just raise that importance. If it's a key decision and your kid, a key factor in the decision of your child where to go for college, tell that school. That matters. That matters a lot. It's even for us kind of earning our place as at campus dining level of being core to the educational mission of the university. Just as Mara was saying about it should be on par with, textbooks and bus driving and so forth. We're really seeing, especially amid the loneliness pandemic, food as community building and food as a place that everyone feels like they belong, and these are fundamental to their own thriving, but also to these larger institutions and larger environments that so often food is taken for granted. So help it not be.
So Sally Sampson, Mara Fleischman, Diana Winters, Sophie Egan, thank you so much for joining us here today in this conversation, because I actually had a legislator say to me once, Ertharin, nobody really cares. And what you've proven today is not only do the people care, but you're making a difference. And you're making a difference for our children and for their futures. And we had a robust dialogue happening in our Q&A today. And I want to thank all the people who joined us and who participated through the chat. We were reading the chat as we're going through the responses to the question. And we appreciate you for being here and for caring about the change that we must make in order to ensure that we address the challenges of diet-related disease that are affecting too many of our children, and that we provide not just for their healthy bodies, but their healthy minds, and as a result, a better future. So thank you all, and on behalf of Food Systems for the Future, I appreciate your participation. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.